Coming up on This Week in Computer Hardware, DRAM prices are going up, people. You might want to buy now. Alienware's 34-inch curved gaming monitor reviewed along with Scythe's new CPU coolers. And hey, Microsoft Surface Book 2 is here along with OnePlus's new 5T. And we got some really important advice if you're buying a bargain price laptop. All that and more coming up next on TWiCH.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust. This is TWiCH.
Bandwidth for TWiCH is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 441, recorded on November 16th, 2017. We told you this would happen.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by iFixit, the free online repair manual for everything. Before you start your next build or fix, head over to ifixit.com/twit to snag the fully loaded ProTech Tool Kit for only $59.95. And check out their array of high-quality parts, tools, and guides. And by WordPress. Plans start at just $4 a month. Get 15% off your brand new website today at wordpress.com/twitch. And by the Ring Video Doorbell. With Ring, you can see and talk to anyone at your door from anywhere in the world using your smartphone. It's like caller ID for your home. Go to ring.com/twitch and get up to $150 off a Ring of Security kit.
Welcome to TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, TWiCH's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most informative, most engaging, and yes, occasionally even the most delightful news, advice, and hardware information available in the entire internet, known and unknown, except for maybe the really scary corners of the dark web. I'm Patty Norton, joined as always by Mr. Ryan Schrautz. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I like to think that even in the dark web, we're probably still the best, right? Like my goal is that no matter what those corners are, we're still better than them in some way. Maybe not every way, but in some way. And, you know, I can hang on to that.
We may not beat you in benchmarking, but damn it, Ryan knows more about sports ball than you do if we're talking about college basketball. We are not, however, talking about college basketball right now. We do that later in the year when it's more emotionally fraught. But from the I told you so department comes the news, well, that we told you was going to happen. Phones are getting more memory, especially in China, where it's kind of like, we put 32 gigabytes of RAM in your phone because that sells better than putting 16 gigabytes of RAM or even 8 gigabytes of RAM. I exaggerate slightly, and I'm not talking about storage. I'm actually talking about the DRAM used by the chipsets. But the price rose another 5% this past quarter, writes Jeremy Hellstrom up on PC Per. He's talking about an Inquirer article. It's great news if you're Samsung or SK Hynix or Micron, who are making bank because they make DRAM. But literally, we have a world shortage of memory, mostly because of smartphones. And you could also say because everything now, ladies and gentlemen, requires memory. Your phone, your television, your car, probably your toothbrush if it's fancy enough. It's slightly ridiculous, but mostly utterly true.
I think one of the stats that we brought up, one of the stats we brought up last night was that but what is the average amount of memory, like storage you have in your phone versus memory you have in your computer? Are these related, right? Like, you know, there's a crossover point occurring with this, and as you're saying, it's being used literally everywhere. And production's not ramping up. If you make memory, this is great news. In terms of your sales prices and margins, at least.
Yeah, but you know, if you're a consumer thinking about building a system, we normally tell you to wait to buy all of your hardware, as long as possible, because invariably prices seem to drop over time. But we're looking at possibly a 10 to 20% bump in DRAM prices in Q4 of this year. That's according to research from DRAM Exchange. So I worry.
It's one of those things that it's crept up very slowly, slow enough that it hasn't been a big red flag for anybody. But if you start to go back and look at places that map this over a year or 2 years, and you start to see that it's a significant difference for, say, if you want 16 gigs of system memory. Is it enough to dissuade DIY users from building systems? Probably not, but it is enough to start getting, say you've got some low-cost mobile devices, notebooks coming out, and they can choose between 4 gigs of RAM or 8 gigs of RAM. As a consumer, you definitely want them to be able to put 8 gigs of RAM in there. However, if you're the buyer, the purchaser, 4 gigs of RAM is going to look a lot more attractive. So that's where the negative really comes into play, is in all these different spaces, right? And if using it for mobile devices as well, I mean, you're still talking about moderate, 4 gigs of memory and those types of things, but it's affecting all storage really across the board there. Anything like that, flash included.
So, build now or pay more later.
Usually the case.
Usually the case.
Yeah.
No, not usually the case. At least over the last couple of years, because prices have steadily gone down, except when they haven't. Bitcoin mining.
Yep.
While we're on the memory vein, while we're mining the memory vein to make a bad non-Bitcoin segue there, Micron's launched 32 gigabytes NVDIMM-N, and Intel's announced 3D X-Point NVDIMM, and I suspect this means Alan has discovered that NVDIMM-N and NVDIMM, it's like Crosspoint and Micron. Sorry, I'm just having a moment where I'm like, couldn't they have settled on one name for all of this stuff?
That would make our lives way too easy. But yes, I would agree.
But yeah, I mean, are we literally talking about finally seeing the transition from lots and lots of Intel Optane and usage of Crosspoint memory, and now we're finally going to see motherboards that are taking Crosspoint super memory in DIMM slots? Possibly eliminating your hard drive storage if you have enough money to throw at the situation?
If you have enough money, sure. This is still, so the non-volatile DIMM stuff is still a mix, right? Like there's actually two different things that are in the story that Alan wrote about. One is the Micron side, where it's actually still using regular memory, right? Like volatile memory, but then there is a flash backup and a supercapacitor that would give enough power for it to copy to flash if the power went out, for example, right? So it's kind of a hybrid design. The Optane-based one is, there doesn't need to be supercapacitor because it is still permanent storage. It is non-volatile storage completely. So it doesn't need to have a battery backup or worry about writing to flash or anything like that. So there's still differences in these integrations, even though the announcements were both made at Supercomputing 17 out in Denver this week. This is still, Micron, what do they talk about? Up to 32 gigs per NVDIMM. We're still a long way before, this replaces storage. Think of this still as, from the Optane side at least, a continuation of trying to bridge that gap, as Alan likes to put it, between flash memory, hard drives to flash memory, and then DRAM, right? So that gap between DRAM and flash is where they're trying to fill, and Optane gets really, really close to that. And if you can move it from a PCIe bus to a, interface direct to the processor, like its memory controller, then you can decrease latency, you can improve performance. Software stacks have to catch up, hardware interfaces and firmwares all have to catch up. But this is more like a late holiday 2018 type idea. And even then, probably not for consumers. Right, probably for enterprise servers, that type of stuff. But eventually, the consumers, if something other technology or idea doesn't supplant that in the meantime.
In theory,
all of it is always just in theory. Yeah,
I know. It's just like that long list of predicates, and then if nothing else takes its place. So
if nothing else breaks it,
yeah. Other than that. Sorry, it's an odd moment. The other thing was coming up today. I was kind of excited. Ken did a review of Huawei's MateBook E. You were a big fan of Huawei's original MateBook. Huawei, barely known as a cell phone manufacturer in the United States, well known as a cell phone manufacturer around the rest of the world. But I'm curious, how did it fare? I mean, are we looking at a Surface killer here, or is it still a little more chill at this point?
It's definitely. I wouldn't go as far as saying it's a Surface killer. Here's the thing, right? So this is when they announced MateBook E and the MateBook was the other one X, I guess. The MateBook E is essentially an identical form factor to the original MateBook. It's a tablet. Right. It's a 2-in-1. We can debate the usefulness of tablets that don't have keyboard docks. Windows tablets that don't have keyboard docks. And this actually ships with the keyboard dock, so you don't have to worry about that debate. Specification-wise, you get a bump to the more recent architecture, but everything else pretty much stays the same. You're still SATA SSD based. You're still 4 gigs of memory. It's got a nice high-resolution screen, 2160 by 1440, 12-inch. Our model had 128 gigs of storage. I think they have a 256 and a 512 option as well. But you still have the single USB 3.1 Type-C connection. It's a Gen 1 connection at that. 33 watt-hour battery. So the performance of it is pretty much the same, maybe a little bit faster, but not much, because it's still this is still the Core M series of parts. It's not, this is the 4 to 7 watt systems, not a 15 watt system. The usability is about the same. The keyboard's a little bit better. Ken talked about the keys are actually smaller, but they're spaced further apart on the keyboard, which is a plus. The trackpad is good, but not as good as if, the glass-coated one on the Surface Pro, for example. Battery life on it is nearly identical to the previous generation at about 5.5 hours. Now, when we do when I quote battery life test that we run, it is actual use case, not like quoted numbers, right? So even though Huawei might quote 9 hours or whatever, we're getting like 5.25 hours. But the ThinkPad X1 in that graph that you see there that gets 9.3 hours, they probably quoted at 14. So everybody lies on the battery life, or they use an outdated way of measuring it. The problem is, so if you see back there, the Huawei MateBook original one was about the same battery life, maybe 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes longer, within a margin of error for these types of tests. It was better then by comparison. What has happened is now you've got the Dell XPS 2-in-1 that's right above it. That is it's still a Core M based product, but it has a bigger battery. And the ThinkPad X1 is a 15 watt part and has a much bigger battery. And the Surface Pro is got a larger battery. So everybody else has kind of improved on its battery metrics, and the Huawei device really hasn't. 5.5 hours of real usable on Wi-Fi browsing time is probably good for most people. As long as you're willing, you're going to charge every day. And, if you have a long flight and you're on it continuously, that's going to be the majority of your time or something like that. Try to keep in mind that this is a super thin and light tablet that happens to have a keyboard dock, as opposed to a laptop where, they've got more room to put different things. It's good. It's just not great in the same market that it used to exist in before. And from price point, when Ken wrote this review, is actually $699. Now it's back up to $799. So apparently it fluctuates back and forth a little bit, which at $699, that's like $150 less than the cheapest Surface Pro with its keyboard dock. At $799, it's only like $50 less. So at $150 lower, it's a pretty compelling option. At just $50, maybe hit or miss. Also keep in mind that the Surface Pen is another $100, whereas the pen for the MateBook is $30. So there's a big accessory purchase price delta there. So I really like it. I don't think this is any kind of revolutionary thing. And I'm curious to see if they have other stuff to showcase during CES in less than 2 months, Patrick, in less than 2 months.
Have you purchased your hotel rooms yet?
I did do that. I did, in fact, book hotel rooms and flights, but no meetings yet. So as far as I know, nothing's happening.
Nothing's going to happen. Just a thing. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. We should talk about it later. I have an opportunity for you. Something you'll enjoy. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware brought to you by our friends at iFixit. If you're familiar with iFixit, and I know you are because we talk about them all the time because we use their tools in our very own personal lives, Mr. Ryan Shrout and I, especially me. Children's toys, iFixit has got me covered with the ProTech Tool Kit. It's good, right? If you've never been to iFixit's website, it's amazing. They're constantly posting teardowns. They let you know whether you'll ever be able to repair something new that you bought. They've got repair videos for popular devices like the Galaxy S8, the iPhones, and the Switch. They're leading the charge in the electronics repair tools industry with their iconic black and blue ProTech Tool Kit. And look at this, ladies and gentlemen. Don't let the sleek design fool you. It's got beauty and brawn, high-quality steel bits, and tools tough enough to handle any repair or mod you throw at them. I have yet to tear apart one of their bits, which, given that I'm a bit of a Conan when working with devices, is kind of impressive. It's amazing. A 64-bit driver kit has all the bits you need for just about any DIY electronics repair. A protective case that not only keeps the bits organized, keeps them covered, makes it hard to lose them and fall out. Look at it right there. It's magnetic on the back, and below it is a little magnetic pad that holds it in place in the ProTech Tool Kit, and you can use that to hold your little tiny parts when you're pulling something apart. It's really nice. They've got a really nice swivel top magnetic precision driver, a flex extension for those screws you just can't get to, like inside the side of the case. It's so crazy. That whole tool rail is packed. They got a ton of plastic opening tools, spudgers, and picks. They've got a suction cup with a really slick handle. That thing you're looking at right there, that was the Jimmy. I love the Jimmy. It's basically a tool that the crew at iFixit came up with to help you pry things open and get the case unpopped. They got metal spudgers in there, electrostatic discharge safe tweezers, an ESD safety strap if you want to get all belt and suspenders and not destroy your job with static shock. A bigger issue in the winter months, especially around here. What really makes this toolkit awesome is that iFixit tools are backed by iFixit's lifetime warranty. You don't need to buy something to get iFixit's free repair resources. Check out over 25,000 free repair guides over at iFixit.com. If you've never been, go to iFixit.com and search around for something you want to fix. I bet you'll find help there. Want to tackle your next hack, fix, or build with the ProTech Tool Kit? Visit iFixit.com/twit to snag the fully loaded ProTech Tool Kit for only $59.95. Thanks, iFixit, for your support of This Week in Computer Hardware.
Indeed.
Oh my goodness. So I'm a huge fan. I am right now looking in front of me is a Dell U34 15W, their ultra wide monitor. I love it. I like it better than the 17, which has a narrower radius and kind of curves a bit more. Might be a bit much for you if you like straight lines at the top of your boxes on your monitor. But we got a chance to look at the Alienware 34 on TechThing this week, and it was really interesting to look at because we've been saying for a while, like, we love the 3440 by 1440, or excuse me, the 3400 by 1440, the WQHD resolution. It's great for work. We rack up documents side by side. It's great for video editing, but it's capped at 60 hertz. So if you're a gamer and you want higher frame rates, you might want a monitor that'll deliver higher frame rates. And of course, what are those things called? Oh yeah, G-Sync or FreeSync. The less expensive, smaller, the 25-inch Alienware monitors, they come in both G-Sync and FreeSync versions. The AW3418DW, which we just took a look at, has G-Sync only, does 100 hertz native. You can overclock it to 120 hertz if you're feeling kind of crazy. And what was interesting for me and kind of hysterical is that the games I play, it occurred to me, don't stress the GPU that much. And as a result, it was not as advantageous to have G-Sync on, although it did some amazing things with some sort of flicker in the background on some of the levels, like, on some of the levels in Rocket League, where most of there wouldn't be a particularly significant difference until you realize sort of the playing field you were on went from being sort of having all sorts of flickery mayhem to having a smooth surface. But as Alan's quick to remind me when we were talking about it, Mr. Malventano, it's when your games are running at like 40 to 60 hertz, that's when G-Sync really makes a huge difference. So yes. I realized that I have to upgrade my game playing to some games that are designed for people, in the last couple years instead of the last several years. But I do got to say, I love the 100 hertz refresh rate. It was particularly velvety. Not that it's that much more velvety than 60 hertz with anything other than 3D, but certainly with 3D, it was amazing to watch things running at 100 hertz. So
yeah, I mean, I think 60 to 100 is still a significant enough difference to note, right? Like it's not quite 60 to 144. When you make that jump, it's
like punch you in the face type of difference. Still going up to 100
or 30 to 60.
I think you'll. That's way different. Even on the desktop, I feel like you would notice 60 to 100, at least a little bit. Seeing your cursor move around, maybe moving some windows and stuff. But in games, for sure, especially if you're running games that you like to have VSync on and you don't like tearing, being able to get that extra frame rate out of it is awesome.
So, just want to give a shout out to the new Alienware monitor. It was interesting. We want to also look at some of the other, HP's got an interesting one. I want to say LG's got some interesting gaming monitors. We're going to try to get a few more of those in there. But it was nice to actually finally have, a 3400 pixel wide high speed gaming monitor to play around with. It's more expensive. It's about half again as much as a U3415 sells for. But if you're a gamer and if you think like, this monitor is probably going to last me 5 years, it may not sound as expensive as I made it sound. I also wanted to mention that Star Wars Jedi Challenges. We talked about that, right? Yeah, it's it's not fun at all. Unless you have one, in which case I can tell the truth.
I have one now, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, okay. So we had that. I left the hardware sitting about 10 feet away from me, so I don't have it. But essentially, right, it's Lenovo and Disney got together with some hardware and software. Crazy. Imagine that. Lenovo making hardware. And that goofy display you're seeing right now is me actually whacking things with my lightsaber. And there's Shannon whacking things with a lightsaber. She's going the training mode right there. It is really fun. It's augmented reality. It takes a smartphone inside of the headset. You can do lightsaber battles, holochess, strategic combat, which is, basically running your giant pile of soldiers and mayhem. And it's really actually kind of cool to be sitting there staring at things wandering around on your floor. Comes with a Lenovo Mirage AR headset, the lightsaber controller, which is connected to your phone via Bluetooth. It's got the tracking beacon that you sit out in front of yourself to make everything to tie the whole thing together like a rug from a certain movie that Robert Hare loved so much. And it runs on iOS or Android. It's pretty fun. I still haven't let my children see it yet because I don't want to deal with my wife threatening to kill me because the children are fighting over who gets to use the lightsaber. Plus the whole fraught process of trying to strap an AR headset onto a small child. $200.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of fun, hours of gameplay. I haven't worked my way through the whole thing yet, but something you should check before you purchase one. They currently have, it's basically all the iPhones from the iPhone 6 up. And on the Android side, Samsung Galaxy S8, S7 Edge, S7, Google Pixel XL, Google Pixel Moto Z Squared 4th Edition, and the LG G6. And they plan to add additional items to that list, but double check the compatible smartphone list before you drop $200 on it. It's a little clunky to put it together because you basically have to put the phone, the carrier, put the carrier in the headset, put the headset on your head. But then you're holding a lightsaber and you're whacking things with it, and you just stop caring about that 60 seconds of putting the thing together.
So did you have any issues with? I didn't feel like it was bright enough. So the way they do AR with your phone is that they're using a mirror essentially, right, to reflect. They put whatever they're projecting as a black screen so that it looks transparent to you on the side, and I found myself wishing it were a little bit brighter. I don't know if that's something I can adjust, like if I go into the phone settings, but there was nothing in the game I could find to adjust brightness. I could adjust volume, but not how bright it was. And maybe it's just, kind of overhead lights that we had or whatever. I'm also curious, is there a multiplayer component to this as well?
I don't think there's a multiplayer component. At least there's not one that I know of yet.
Okay.
And I did not have lighting issues with it, but I was also mostly using it in the warehouse. Sorry, I appear to be slouching and disappearing from the screen. I was using it in the warehouse, which has fluorescents hung 30 feet above the floor, and not an incredible amount of them. But also the Z-squared force I was using is pretty bright. Got it. In terms of
worth noting that it doesn't support the iPhone 10 yet. I couldn't get the screen doesn't line up with any of the profiles on it.
So for the several of you that don't have the iPhone, for all 3 or 4 of you listening,
but I did use an 8 Plus and it worked fantastically. The reason I asked about the multiplayer is that little orb that you put on the ground. There's an orb that you put on the ground that has AA batteries that you turn on, it lights up. Yeah, and it has 2 colors, right? And the point of this ball is that it lets the phone know where the ground is, so it doesn't have to do any kind of pre-setup or anything like that. But it's 2 different colors. It makes me wonder if maybe there's something to do if you have 2 people that have these headsets or something. But I would kind of assume that they would just use the same.
Yeah, I was assuming that it had 2 colors, so that if you have 2 children, they get this at the same time, or if you get one for you and one for your incredibly geeky spouse, so that you and she can both use your lightsabers in the same room without ending up divorced.
Fair.
Just saying. This is one of those things where I'll be very, 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 very curious to see what the driver update situation is like. Is this going to be supported like, a flagship phone or a flagship piece of hardware, or is it going to be supported like a mid-range television or a low-end Android phone? So
yeah, does it feel like a one-off product, or does it feel like it's something that they're going to support long-term? I think, at $200, the stuff you get with it is a stretch, right? The amount of content you get for $200. It's definitely
you get a lightsaber.
A huge Star Wars fan. B, do you have slightly more disposable income than average? And this is a neat toy that you may use for an hour, you may use for 5 hours, you may use for 20 hours. I don't really know. I haven't gone that far into the content either. And it's not, it's not perfect, right? There are some times where the lightsaber becomes unaligned and you have to hit a button to kind of reassign it, in relation to the controller. But still really, really neat technology that they're able to get and roll out. And hey, there's not going to be any slowdown of Star Wars licensed gear anytime soon.
Surely you
get used to this kind of stuff. Yeah.
It's just going to keep coming, people.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah.
If you have children that love Star Wars, you're going to be vomiting with rage in a few months. Unless you're completely impervious to their weeping pleas.
Right.
Oh my goodness. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by WordPress. We know that building something new, something that others connect with, is a lot easier if you have the right tools. That's why we are excited to have WordPress.com as a sponsor. We use WordPress.com every day here, and let me tell you, whether you're looking to create a personal blog, a business site, or both, creating your website on WordPress.com helps others find you, remember you, and connect with you. You don't need experience. You don't need to hire someone. WordPress.com guides you through the entire process from start to finish. They take care of the technical side, so it's easy to get your site up and running. They have hundreds of beautiful designs to choose from. You get built-in search engine optimization and social sharing. Their business plan lets you access hundreds of plugins and themes. Their customer support team, made up of WordPress experts, eager to help you get the most from your site. Available for help 24 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and weekends too. Plans are cheap. They start at just $4 a month. And come see why 29% of all websites run on WordPress. Get started today with 15% off any new plan purchase. Go to WordPress.com/Twitch to create your website and find the plan that's right for you. That's WordPress.com/Twitch for 15% off your brand new website. And we want to thank WordPress for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. So many shiny websites are running on WordPress.
Sebastian posted this up on PCPer. This is a roundup of 3 different Scythe branded CPU coolers. And as you look at the 3 of them, they really couldn't be much different. You have this, you have 2 kind of standard looking heat pipe based fin coolers, one slightly bigger than the other, actually one quite a bit bigger than the other. And you have one that has this weird V shape, the Scythe Grand Kama, I don't know, Scythe Grand Kama Cross 3. And it was interesting, right? Because we were having a debate looking at these different cooler designs. And before we looked at Sebastian's results, we had this scientific discussion about how would the airflow work across this angled heat pipe fin cooler design, and would air actually get pushed out the sides rather than through the fins because of the oblique angles of which the air would be meeting these fins. And then as it turned out, no, none of that happened. If you look at the results, it is in fact that the Kama Cross 3 was the best performing without introducing additional noise into the testing, or significant enough additional noise to warrant anything based on his testing. It looks the most weird, and that could be a plus or a minus depending on what your case design looks like. But all these were pretty good devices actually, and they range in price from the downside to the Grand Kama Cross 3 is that its availability was iffy at best. Looks like only third-party resellers it was like $100, as opposed to the Mugen 5, which is $51, or Amazon for $48. And then the much smaller Biaco cooler, easier to find, inexpensive at $22.99. So $22.99, that's a different class of cooler, but still relatively good if you look at those results. Even compared to, it's 10 degrees Celsius hotter than the Noctua D14, which is one of the best air coolers out there. But both of the other sides, the Mugen 5 and the Grand Kama Cross, did quite well, actually. So
cool.
Yeah, good stuff. There's plenty of air coolers out there, but what I have found recently is that it seems that they seem to cycle through pretty quick. That Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo is evergreen. It'll be here for the rest of my remaining days. I'm quite confident at this point. But the other ones, sometimes they're there for a year, sometimes they're there for 2 years, but we seem to have this cycle of stuff. So it's good to see it's good to have reviews of what the new options are. So when you hit up Newegg or Amazon, that you're not in the dark. Yeah. A cycle of stuff. The Ryan Schratt story. Oh man. We really love this guy department. Fortune.com has a profile of Jensen Huang, and the title, "This man is leading an AI revolution in Silicon Valley, and he's just getting started." It starts out with, "The co-founder and CEO of semiconductor and software maker NVIDIA saw the future of computing more than a decade ago and began developing products that could power the artificial intelligence era. Thanks to that vision and relentless execution, his chipmaker today is perhaps the hottest company in Silicon Valley, and it may just be getting started." And then it's like they're in a hip Greek restaurant in downtown Palo Alto. Jensen's pulling up his shirt sleeve to show his tattoo. He wants to extend it because he's a hip guy, but he's got, adult children. And, I love this profile. There's a lot of love here from Mr. Andrew Nuska. There's a lot. There's a lot of love here. And I bring that up because while NVIDIA has been successful, while NVIDIA has steadfastly made some badass GPU products, and they've certainly held the line, I think, a little bit better than AMD, although AMD is coming at them like a delete expletive freight train right now, especially as you look at them sort of, if they can get their capacity up on the GPU manufacturing side. I don't really remember him 10 years ago saying that AI is the future and we are going to build processors with CUDA cores that will be developed and extended into architectures optimized for artificial intelligence. I remember, the attempt to create mobile ARM processors with more powerful graphics that they never delivered on time, nearly killing a first of their couple early adopters, leading them to create, home theater products under their own brand because nobody else would buy them anymore because, late deliveries, and moving into automotive and other areas as it became expeditious to move the products in directions where there seemed to be growth rather than decline, like desktops. Or am I just missing the genius here? No, you're not missing it, and I'm with you, right? Because the lines of like, oh, and they may just be getting started is it's like, well, you and I have been doing this for a long time. These companies have been around for as long as I have been doing hardware coverage in this way. NVIDIA has existed, so to suddenly think of them as this startup that's like just getting started doing things, they're just getting started in AI and machine learning. Because everybody is just getting started in AI and machine learning. NVIDIA has a huge lead in this space, right? Right. They have a huge advantage in software. They invested early. They're clearly ahead of the game, ahead of Intel, ahead of AMD. All those guys are well behind NVIDIA. But clearly, if you look at their stock price, if you look at their market share, if you look at all their product lines, they have done amazing stuff, and they deserve all the praise that they're getting. It's just a little odd to think of them as just getting started when, and in fact, they have been working at this for a long time. Anybody will tell you, like, hey, we've been iterating on this GPU architecture and technology for decades to get where we're at. So,
yeah, I mean, it's also, I mean, and one thing I do want to say outright, lest I sound particularly obnoxious even for me, is that, you know, Jensen has, I should probably call him Mr. Huang, because we're certainly not on a first name basis. You know, he has executed and, you know, battled his way through some incredible setbacks, delivery issues. You know, he has steadfastly ignored everybody saying desktop and gaming are done. He's not, you know, curled into a little ball and wept when AMD got the deals for the consoles. You know, and in the last 3 years, sales have gone up almost 20%. Profits have gone up like 56% annually, according to the article in Fortune, which is pretty amazing. You know, and, you know, their stock price has gone from $30 to like $200. So, you know, that makes them one of the biggest companies in technology, or, you know, in the world, period. Now, you know, whether or not stock price has any relationship to anything other than the wealth of the investors is an entirely different question. Because at this point, you know, you're looking at a stock price that is, you know, growing considerably faster than, say, anybody out there.
Yes.
You know, let's see, Intel stock price. So Intel's at 45.
NVIDIA's probably near 220 now. Yeah, 211. If you compare these, you know, on the year, clearly NVIDIA has done a lot, right? A year ago they were $92 and now they're $211, so more than double in the course of a year. It's been an astounding run. And I see no reason why I'm not a stock guy. I'm not a financial analyst in this regard. I see no reason why their technology won't continue to be the leader, that their market share positions won't continue to be the leader, that they won't still be the best implementation of both on the consumer side and the enterprise side for the foreseeable future, despite all the stuff about, you know, Raja Kaduri leaving AMD and going to Intel, and Intel saying they were going to build discrete GPUs and do all that type of stuff that is a clear attack on NVIDIA's markets. That's a 3 to 4 year window. And NVIDIA is not going to sit there during that time. They have a huge investment in R&D, not as much as Intel, but Intel's, you know, in general, a larger company, but it's still substantial nonetheless. So I'm not worried about NVIDIA anytime soon. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also, I mean, when you look at the breakdown of their revenues, right, they're closing in on $7 billion a year in sales in 2017. Over $4 billion of that is from gaming. $835 million, which is a big chunk of change, is professional visualization. Another $830 for data centers, chip royalties $700 million, and automotive just under $500 million. So literally more than half, well over half of their revenue is still GPUs.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm no financial expert here, but as I look at these stock ratings, Intel has a PE ratio, a price to earnings ratio of 16. NVIDIA's is 52.9. Right? So that's a lot of people betting on long-term NVIDIA growth, essentially.
Or taking advantage of a short-term run in the last 12 months.
Right. Yeah. You're right.
You know, I mean, or 24 months, because you look at, you know, it was 12. It got to 30 in 2016, and then it exploded. You know, we don't talk about financials a lot, as Ryan says. We're not money guys, but it is interesting to see how people look at hardware from the outside. I thought this one was particularly amusing. You know, and you know, no doubt, NVIDIA has worked really hard to figure out ways to take their core technologies and spin them out beyond their core audience, and maybe in some ways done that better than Intel. Because Intel seems to have all of the resources and all of the opportunities and just keeps jumping on them really late. But I'll be curious to see, you know, how long it is before gaming revenues are not the bulk contributor to the bottom line over at NVIDIA. But it's exciting stuff. It's much better than being like, everyone's going out of business and I won't be able to play my games next year. Console gamers talking smack about PC games. Yeah, you're talking smack now. You looked at it on my 4K monitor, did you? Sorry, it's somebody I was playing a 4K game on an 8K monitor here before I had to send the 8K monitor back. More's the pity. And somebody's like, "That looks amazing." I'm like, "That's because it's not 4-year-old graphics on your 720p TV, dork." That just probably sounded even more obnoxious than I meant it to. Nah. PC gaming, people, it rocks because it's got more power and better monitors. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell. One of them right now is on the door that is guarding Ryan Shrout's safety. Not just at home, but the safety of his family at work. Actually, not just at work, but the safety of his family at home. Ring's mission to make neighborhoods safer. Today, over 1 million people, that's a lot of humans, use the amazing Ring Video Doorbell to help protect their homes. It's simple. Security begins at the front door, but it doesn't end there, right? So the Ring Video Doorbell, it's a doorbell. It's got a camera on it. It's awesome. You can talk to people. You can hear people. "Hey, kid, get off my porch," or "Excuse me, please don't leave that incredibly expensive package there to be stolen." It's cool, right? That's why they're extending that same level of security to the rest of your home with the Ring Floodlight Cam. Just like Ring's Video Doorbell, Floodlight Cam is a motion-activated camera and floodlight that connects to your phone. With HD video and two-way audio, you know the moment anyone steps on your property. So you can speak to visitors, even set off an alarm right from your phone. And with Floodlight Cam, when things go bump in the night, you'll immediately know what it is. Oh, good, it's a raccoon, not the kid next door trying to break into my house. Whether you're home or away, the Ring Floodlight Cam lets you keep an eye on your home. Floodlight Cams offer the ultimate in home security with high visibility floodlights and a powerful HD camera that puts security in your hands. Named the Wall Street Journal's best of CES 2017, it's pretty awesome. And you can monitor every corner of your property with a ring of security kits. All kits include a Ring Video Doorbell and your choice of either 1, 2, or 3 floodlight cams. Connect your Ring Video Doorbell with your favorite smart locks and hubs for added convenience, monitoring, and security. Do we have you excited? Do you want to protect your home? With Ring, you're always home. Save up to $150 off a Ring of Security Kit when you go to ring.com/Twitch. That's ring.com/TWiCH. And we want to thank Ring for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. It's exciting.
Very cool.
We love PC cases because we love PCs and PC gaming because it's better than console gaming. Yep, it's an obnoxious day. It's the rain, people. It's raining here in California, and it's not going to stop for 3 months. I can't decide if FSP's CMT 510, it is a tempered glass enclosure. It is a PC in a glass house, as it were. 4mm thick tempered glass with translucent galaxy dark coloring, writes Jeremy Hellstrom. I'm kind of down on excessive LED usage, but in this case, it actually appeals to me. And I'm kind of jamming on the 3 giant fans, or at least I am until it's time to clean the glass. From the dust,
especially if it's cleaning the inside of the glass. What I always wonder about these types of things is, so this is a rendering, this is the mock-up, whatever you want to call it, right? This is not actual photos. Do they actually look that good in person? Probably not. They're a little stylized. We see that when we look at new motherboards on this show, right? You look at the PR photos they put out; they look amazing. When we get them, the lights aren't quite as bright. They're not quite as colorful or whatever you want to call it, right? Yeah. So it's a little different. I'm a fan of the tempered glass designs that have become popular now, right? You're right. Yeah. Dust, fingerprints, all that is awful in regards to this. But in terms of like when it's clean and it looks good, there's a reason that person unscrewing that thumb screw was using gloves, right? Because they didn't want to leave smear marks on the glass. But I do like the design. One question we came up with, of course, is, and I think we've seen this on at least one other case, the problem with a all glass front panel is that those fans up front are only drawing air in from the sides, which is not a lot of air potentially. Again, we don't have it. We can't really tell how much space there is, how much airflow there is, but
I have a case sitting next to me that draws its airflow through the front. And I'll be honest with you, it draws more than enough to keep everything cool, but you can also hear the air. When you're doing some heavy-duty computing, you can hear the air being sucked through those slots at a high rate of speed. So that to me is more, you can get an amazing amount of air through the front of a case. It may only look like a thin 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch strip, but that's a hole this big. And with 3 fans pulling, it's probably going to pull a lot of air through that hole. It's probably also going to pull all the dust in your house through that hole, and that's where things get really exciting. At least if you don't like, dust. My favorite title for a hardware review in a really long time comes from The Verge. Tom Warren wrote up their review of the Surface Book 2, beauty and brawn, but with limits. And part of the reason they say that is because it's being billed as a portable desktop PC, and but what made me laugh so hard was like, yes, a portable has limits. For example, battery power, the TDP on the enclosure that minimizes or puts a constraint on the amount of cooling, which puts a constraint on the amount of processor you can throw inside of there. And there's the physical size, like unless you want to carry a 18-pound, massive brick beast, you have to constrain the size, especially in the 21st century. It's another Surface Book, It's got a big 15-inch screen in this case. It's heavy. It's detachable. It starts at $2,500 for the 15-inch version. Jeez. Which makes it $100 more than a comparable MacBook Pro, and at the very high end of the laptop market. Mr. Warren makes a good point of putting it out there. If you get a terabyte of storage inside of it for the maxed out version, it's $3,300. Now, to put that in a little bit of context, it's $1,500. It's $1,000 less for the entry level 13.5-inch model, which I probably should look on the Microsoft's website because I forgot to check if that's with 4 gigabytes of RAM. If you're buying a laptop and you're looking at that $799 deal on that super awesome laptop, don't buy it. Pony up the extra $200 to get 8 gigabytes of RAM, because if you're going to be living with a laptop for 3 years, trust me, you do not want to be living with 4 gigabytes of RAM and Windows 10 for the next 2 years of your life. Just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Yes, in every instance, correct.
Not in every instance, but in this, this I think we are united.
Okay. I meant instances of 4 gigs versus 8 gigs of memory, not in agreeing with you necessarily. How about that? Is that better?
That works for me. Sorry, we torture each other because we've been doing this for a long time. So I have excellent news. There is one model of the 13.5-inch Intel Core i5 Surface Book 2. It starts at $1,500. It has 8 gigabytes of RAM, 256 gigabytes of storage. And then when you go up to Core i7 quad core, sorry, I really love the quad core processors this year. I'd like them to have more 8th gen technology than they have, but I'm really happy with doubling the number of cores and threads. By the time you get up to a Core i7, you're looking at $1,999, but you get a discrete GeForce GTX 1050 with 2 gigabytes of GDDR5 and 256 gigabyte drive. If you want 16 gigabytes of RAM, and why wouldn't you? The cost is up to $2,500, and it's $3,000 for the 1 terabyte version with a 16 gigabytes of RAM. So, just saying.
Sounds good.
These are not inexpensive, but if you're into the whole like giant tablet with a massive keyboard, this is kind of the premier Windows option. So. You excited?
Yeah, I kind of am. Like, I never really. I used the first Surface Book for a little while. It's been a long time since it's been updated. I would love to try this again. Mostly because of the battery life claims, right? Like, I think in that review on The Verge, it's on their where they list battery life. It says claimed 17 hours, but real world is closer to 8 or 9. That would kind of surprise me, because I think that was, if I remember back, like the Surface Book's biggest advantage over other notebooks was its battery life, right? And I know they sell versions that have discrete graphics and those that don't, and I'm sure there's a difference in those configuration options. But surely a Surface Book 2 would be able to out battery life a Lenovo X1 Carbon, right, or something like that, just because of sheer amount of battery capacity that they put in those things, right? Because there's battery in both the keyboard dock portion and in the tablet portion. So I don't know. I would like to run our testing on it and see where it stacks up, because that's where it would shine for me. But it is a bigger, bulkier type device than I'm used to carrying with me for travel and stuff. But Microsoft still does interesting things with hardware. This is not like, and I say that knowing that like the Surface Book isn't really different technologically than the previous one, and the Surface Pro hasn't really changed a whole lot in the last couple of generations, but they're still best in class, as that site says right there, the Microsoft site says, right? So it's I need to see it again.
Yeah, well, it's also the addition of the NVIDIA GTX 1050 and 1060 I think is pretty awesome. Mr. Warren says in The Verge that he's played Overwatch, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and Destiny 2 on the Surface Book 2, and, quote, it handles all three really well. He's been doing that with an Xbox One controller on the go. And he's like, hey, yeah, you got to tweak settings on Destiny 2 to get 60 frames per second. But even on the native resolution of medium settings, I was getting around 50 frames per second. That's nice. If you are like, I am Joe Business Traveler, I am stuck in hotel rooms 16 days a month, I do not want to carry a second laptop, but I would like to play my video games. This is a way of doing that. So, in one sense, if you think about the enormous, outrageous, obscene prices we routinely see for gaming laptops, this is suddenly looking kind of bargainish by comparison. So, 3:2 aspect ratio, which you will either love or hate. 3000 by 2000 pixels on the 15-inch, 3240 by 20. Excuse me, 3000 by 2000 on the 13.5-inch model, 3240 by 2160 on the 15-inch model. Unlike the Dell XPS 13, it has a camera on the top of the monitor, so it does not guarantee you nostril cam if you do not put the device up on a stack of phone books before using it.
Yep.
So
nice.
I'm kind of tempted to go to the Microsoft store and see what the keyboard feels like. No budget for this, no need for a new laptop, but I do love the as you pull the monitor out of the top, because every time I do that, I always think, oh, wait, it's supposed to do that.
Yep.
OnePlus 5T hands-on, a slightly bigger, slightly better flagship, or what Chris Velasco says over at Engadget. This is what the OnePlus 5 should have been to start with. So I think that's great. The OnePlus 5 was not the best flagship debut we've seen on Android in the last few years, but Snapdragon 835, 6 gigabytes of RAM, 64 gigabytes of storage, which probably sounds a lot like its predecessor. They also do 8 gigs of RAM with 128 gigabytes of storage. Did we mention DRAM supplies disappearing into cell phones? We weren't kidding about that. Oxygen OS, which is based on Android 7.1.1. It would be nice if it was running Oreo, but OnePlus says, quote, a beta build of Oxygen OS running on Oreo will be available by the end of 2017. And Mr. Velasco says, we'll see about that, which is a sign of someone who has an appropriate amount of skepticism about any Android operating system delivery. 3,300 milliamp hour battery, and that should be good for a full day's use. So I'm excited for OnePlus to have a nice sort of flagship phone again. And
there's definitely room for that after all I would say, the split decision on the Pixel 2 hardware. There's definitely room for a flagship Android device to come in and take that spot, at least for a generation or two, until Google fixes their stuff.
It starts at $500, so I'll be very curious to see.
So yeah, I mean, it's half the price of the Pixel 2.
Yes.
So impressive.
That is a non-trivial. Yeah, I mean, it's there's just a lot of expensive phones out there, and man, face unlocking sounds fantastic, but it doesn't sound $1,100 worth of fantastic to me. You know.
I will tell you that it's not that fantastic, and it's definitely not worth $1,100. It's. I guess I haven't been here since I've had the phone. On the iPhone 10, it works in really cool ways, but when it doesn't work, it's incredibly frustrating. Because it doesn't feel like it should never not work. Once it works in the dark, once it works with your glasses on and your sunglasses on and a hat, you think, wow, okay, this stuff is figured out. And then I'm literally sitting in this office and I point the phone at me and it goes, nope, please insert your passcode. And I'm like, what could you possibly not? Yeah. So, yeah. I think it will be. I think it's a good tech. It would be better if it still had the fingerprint, Touch ID stuff integrated on it too. But, it is what it is now.
We dream.
Yeah.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to draw this episode of This Week in Computer Hardware to a close. You can find more of me at techthing.com. That's THKTHING.com or avxl.com. That's that's Shannon, and that's the podcast right there I do with Robert Heron about home theater. And that's the podcast I do about technology with Shannon. They're bouncing back so fast in the studio. My head's about to explode. I'm Patrick Norton, in case you missed that, at Patrick Norton on the Twitters. He's at Ryan Shrout on the Twitters, and he is Ryan Shrout in real life. And you can find him at the glorious hardware review website he has created, maintained, staffed, and loved for longer than you can probably remember. That's pcper.com. And if you haven't checked out their podcast, you should. It's pretty awesome. And if you haven't checked out their reviews, I'm ashamed of you. Go to pcper.com right now and spend some quality time getting your hardware knowledge on, because they are deep, in-depth, well-reported, well-thought out, awesome reviews. With that, ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you can find all the older episodes of TWiCH and, of course, information on how to subscribe at twit.tv/TWiCH. And, hey, quick reminder, next week, Thanksgiving, Ryan and I will be embedded with the families, and no one will be at Twitch Central, so we will not have hardware news for you, which is probably not a heartbreaker because there's not a lot of hardware news released during Thanksgiving. And if you're looking for Black Friday ideas, go to the Wirecutter, because last year they looked at like 22,000 million deals and found like 60 worth talking about. Nice. And that pretty much sums up my opinion of Black Friday. A glorious time to get fleeced on deals that aren't actually deals, except when they are. And when they are, you should buy 4 of them and then resell them on eBay. That's the influence of Shannon talking to me. I got to end it, people. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and we will see you the week after next. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.